In this video, I will be discussing some of the similarities and differences between laws and rules. So please pay close attention. Feel free to pause the video or rewind the video anytime you need to. You will be using this video to complete the assignment. The main difference between rules and laws is the consequences associated with breaking them. While each is developed to create a sense of order, fair play, and safety, the consequences of breaking a law are usually much more serious than the consequences of breaking a rule. Laws are like the legal version of rules. When you're a child, your parent set rules to be followed. When you are in a society, the government sets laws to be followed. When a rule is broken, the consequences tend to be uncomfortable but mild in comparison to the breaking of a law. Laws are enforced by the government, usually the police, and in special cases, the military. Laws are written in a very specific way. When you are caught breaking a law, there are very specific things that follow. These specific procedures usually apply to everyone. Rules are much more flexible and usually come with much less serious consequences. People like parents, coaches, teachers, and some organizations can set up rules for games, rules for the home, even rules you have to follow in an amusement park. Very specific things have to happen for a rule to become a law. In a democracy, a law starts off as an idea, becomes a bill, and must go through a series of processes before it can become a law. Turning an idea into a law can be very difficult and take a long time. Rules can be established much more easily and quickly, often by a single person. Rules help us learn about boundaries and prepare us for living in adult society. As youngsters, we tend to learn that there are rules about hitting, stealing, lying, and being disrespectful. As young adults, we are held accountable for these rules by becoming law-abiding citizens. Laws are not meant to set teaching boundaries, but are in place to ensure everyone in society is protected and can have an opportunity to live their best lives. In order to be effective, laws must be enforced. Violating a rule could lead to being grounded, having your phone taken away, getting detention, or being asked to leave an establishment. Violating a law can be punishable by having to pay a fine, imprisonment, and even death if the violation of the law is serious enough. Following the rules is the best practice to prepare for following laws. So, to summarize this a little bit, I realize some of that may have had some complicated words in there, some kind of tricky definitions, some difficult concepts, but that's okay. I'm going to go over it and summarize what all of that was right here. If you still don't understand after the summary, then please reach out to me immediately so I can help clarify things for you. So to summarize, why do rules and laws exist in the first place? Rules are often set during childhood to get children ready to live in a society with laws. So rules exist, of course, to keep people safe and to protect people's rights and to make sure things, go smoothly. That usually happens when you're a kid. But another reason why there are rules is to get kids ready to live in a society with laws. Laws are not a teaching tool, but a tool for keeping order in society. So as you guys well know, that when you break a rule, there are consequences. But the consequences to breaking a rule are usually nowhere near as serious as the consequences for breaking a law. So, of course, we don't want to just have you start following laws out of nowhere when you turn 18. We help you practice. We help you prepare to follow laws. And the best way to help you to prepare to follow laws is to have you follow rules. That way, if you break a rule, you're not going to go to prison. You're not going to have to pay a $500 fine. You're not going to have to pay a giant speeding ticket. There are consequences to breaking rules, but they're nowhere near as serious as the consequences for breaking laws. So rules help you practice. Who makes rules? Who makes laws? Rules are usually set by individuals and organizations. Individuals that set rules. You guys know, of course, your parents set rules. Your teachers make rules, and sometimes organizations make rules. So something like if you play a rec sport, there may be rules for, playing certain games, and may be true of when you play video games. And when you go over your friend's house, there are rules usually set by the parents there. Okay. Rules are usually set by individuals and organizations. And also the rules that you have to follow at your house might be different than the rules you have to follow at your friend's house. The rules that you have to follow in social studies class might be different than the rules you have to follow in another class. This is how rules work. Laws are a little bit different. The government sets laws. Okay, so if there is a law against hitting someone, or against stealing, or against some other, serious crime, something like that, if you violate the law, it doesn't matter if you're in this person's home or that person's home, or in this school or that school. If you break a law, that law has been set by the government. And it really doesn't matter where you are when you break that law. Okay, much more serious. How are rules made and how are laws made? Rules can be established without really any process or procedure. So again, I'll use the example of the rules you have to follow at home and the rules that you have to follow at school. So if your parents make rules that you have to follow, they can basically just come up with that without asking anybody. Okay, maybe your mom or dad or whoever decides that you should have to follow a rule. You have to be in bed by 10 o'clock. They don't have to ask anybody if that rule's okay. It's their home, they're the parent, they can make those rules. Let's say you show up to social studies class, and there's a rule where, let's say there's a rule that I have in my class where to sharpen your pencil, you have to raise your hand. I can just decide that that's the rule. You have to raise your hand to go sharpen your pencil. But you may go to another class where the teacher says, you don't have to raise your hand. You just quietly go up and sharpen your pencil. There doesn't have to be any process. There doesn't have to be a big discussion with lots and lots of different people to make rules. Individuals can basically just make the rules. If they're in charge, they make the rules. Laws are very different. Laws have to go through certain processes to become laws, including a voting process. So in other words, for a law to come into existence, let's say it's the law that you can't drive over 55 miles an hour. It's not like somebody was just sitting in a room and said, boom, 55 miles an hour. If you go over, you're breaking the law. It has to be discussed amongst lots of people. There's lots of decisions. Again, people vote on what they think. Should it be 55 miles an hour? Should it be 45 miles an hour? Should it be 60 miles an hour? What are the consequences? It's a big, giant process with laws, and it usually takes a long time. How are rules enforced? How are laws enforced? In other words, how do they make sure that you actually follow the rules? And how do they make sure you actually follow the laws? Rules are usually enforced by individuals, again, or organizations such as parents, teachers, schools, amusement parks, and sports organizations. So, if you go to the cafeteria at Fallston Middle School and you start chucking food at people, you're not breaking a law, but you are breaking a rule. And the teachers and the administrators in the cafeteria, they will enforce those rules. If your parents say that you can't be on your phone after 9 o'clock, and you are, it's your parents that enforce those rules. And they say, hey, you've got to follow this rule or we're going to take your phone away or we're going to ground you or something like that. Same thing with sports organizations. If you're out there playing soccer and you break a rule, the police are not going to come for you. But the referees, the coaches, there will be consequences to violating those rules. Laws, on the other hand, are enforced by the government, and the most common way that the government enforces laws is through the police. Okay, so if I go out and I do 70 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour highway, some person is not going to just, pull up to my car and say, you broke the law, that was a bad thing. The police are going to come, they're going to put their sirens on, they might pull me over, they might even give me a ticket for that. It's the police that enforce the laws. And in case you haven't noticed, because laws are so much more, kind of strenuous and serious, and the consequences are so much more serious. And when somebody breaks a rule by, say, chucking some food in the cafeteria, or by cutting in line at an amusement park, or by hitting someone too hard in a sport, the people that enforce those rules are not like the police. Namely, the police carry guns with them. They have things like their sidearms, their firearms. They have handcuffs. They might have mace. These are the people that enforce laws. And sometimes, if a law that's broken by enough people or it's serious enough, the government might even call in the military. That would be the army to enforce the laws. Very different than rules. And finally, what are the consequences for breaking rules and what are the consequences for breaking laws? Rules are more flexible. They have lighter consequences. Laws are much more rigid and carry stiff penalties, including being sent to jail and in some cases, even being put to death. So this is what you need to know about rules and laws. And now I'm going to go over your assignment. Again, you will be using this video, so you'll be jumping around in this video to complete this assignment. You will need this video to complete your assignment. So don't close it up after you see this next part. For your assignment, you will need 2 pieces of plain white paper. Printer paper is fine. If you have construction paper, something like that, that's fine. You'll need a pencil, and you will need some colored pencils. So you'll be able to go run and get those as soon as I'm done explaining your assignment. What you're going to do is you're going to draw 2 Venn diagrams. So on one of the pieces of paper, and if you can see that if this is the edge of the paper, you want this Venn diagram, these circles, to be as big as you can possibly make them on the paper. Now, guys, ladies, I know you can't draw a perfect circle. I certainly can't either. Do your best. Do it in pencil if you have to erase or something like that. If you have a way to draw a good circle other than just freehanding it, you can do that. But you're going to copy this exactly as you see it, as big as you can, onto a blank piece of paper. And at the top here, you will put 4 notes, rules. Here, 4 notes, laws. And in this part, you can bullet it, and you don't need to use complete sentences, but you need to have phrases. You can't have single words. 4 bulleted notes about rules. Use the video to go find out information about rules. Over here in this spot 4 notes that apply just to laws. And you're going to have to think about this a little bit. If you can come up with any notes, any information that applies to rules and laws, and there is information in this video that applies to rules and laws, you'll put that in here. Okay? You don't have to have anything in here, but you should have 2 or 3 different things in here that apply to rules and laws. That's what you'll do on the first sheet of paper. And on the second sheet of paper, you'll see it's the same Venn diagram, except here you'll have 4 examples of rules. And this is going to kind of have to come from, your own lives. We've done this yesterday, basically. And you can use the rules that you used in the previous assignment and you can use bullets. Don't need complete sentences, but make sure that you're clear phrases, 4 examples of rules that you have to follow. And you can use the ones from the previous assignment. And over here, I'm going to ask you to try to think. And you might need to ask your parents. You might need to kind of think about this. Maybe a little bit trickier. 4 examples of what you think are laws. Okay? If you need to go onto the internet and just look up examples of laws, you can do that too. And you can write the answers right in here. And in here, what you're going to try to do is brainstorm, see if you can come up with anything that you think are rules and laws. I will give you one example just off the top of my head. If you are in school and none of you would ever do this, you just walked up to someone and punched them. You would be breaking the rules at school, but you would also be breaking the law. And in that case, if you did that, you would get consequences, probably from the principals, maybe from your parents, but you would also have a discussion with the school police officer because you'd be doing both. You can use that as an example, but see if you can come up with any others. Okay? When you're done this assignment, you will submit it to It's Learning, to take a picture, take a picture of both. You can have an individual picture of each and turn them both in to It's Learning. Make sure you have followed all directions. If you have any questions at all, please watch the video to make sure that your questions aren't answered in the video. If you still have questions, you can ask your classmates or you can ask me.